is a serious question, guys. I don't expect any funny answers on this one.
The digital euro is being created in Brussels, not in brothels.
Opening scene.
Welcome to Fintech Uncut, the quiz show with candid commentary on the biggest fintech and financial services news of the week that was. Disclaimer: this show is created purely for entertainment purposes and contains segments of sarcasm, satire, parody, and humor. Even if you don't think any of it is funny, the creators do not accept any responsibility or liability for the accuracy of any content shared and reminded you to always fact-check everything yourself. And now, it's over to your quiz master.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fintech Uncut, the quiz show with candid commentary on the latest and the biggest fintech and financial services stories with the wise guy, the other guy, and the usual suspect, Judge Mary. My name is Rick Kugelbergs, your host of the day. And this is the 29th try that the wise guy and the other guy are competing to be best in class of the probably best fintech comedy quiz show in the world. Let's go. First question. We all know that Belgium stands for fries, beer, and chocolate. But even more, it stands for reliability, trustworthiness, and modesty. And this is a serious question, guys. I don't expect any funny answers on this one. What does all this have to do with the Revolut Ultra plan?
I know all about Ultra because I attended the Ultra Music Festival in Split in Croatia a couple of years ago. And it is payments related because they had contactless payments bands that were prepaid that you paid for your beer, your fries, and your chocolate with. So there, I've linked all of the things. So Revolut must be the behind the latest Ultra Music Festival and are providing the contactless payment this time.
We are known for festivals, but it's not the right answer.
I can't talk about anything to do with Belgium, Rick, because my wife threatened to divorce me after my last trip, and she thought I went to brothels, and I said, no, I went to Brussels. But she found a receipt for what she thought was a whore garden, and I said, no, it's Hogarden, it's a beer. And so we really fell out big time.
That's a good one.
But again, they're wrong. Yeah, it's not even an answer to the question.
Is this news that Revolut has announced they're building a new headquarters in Germany, and in order to offer the Revolut card, the Revolut Ultra card in France, they've realized they have to go through Belgium because that's what Germans always do?
Look, I mean, Revolut, there's some big news. Only of a couple of hours ago, they've launched their new robo-advisor service in the USA market, removing all friction from people to invest. And you've got 5 different portfolios according to your risk appetite. And it's made it very, very easy, low fees, cutting out the middlemen. That's Ultra experience for you.
What's that going to do with Belgium?
Well, he just said Revolut, and yeah, it's, you know.
I mean,
I'm giving them a +1 for that.
Well, Revolut Ultra is this amazing card that they've launched, which to me looks like the American Express Platinum card. It's got a whole range of offers wrapped up inside it, from currency exchange to cashback and interest and points. And one of the things that's included is a really nice insurance package. And I did see, because you told me, Rick, that a Belgian insurtech is the partner on that product. Is that right?
That is correct.
And how do you pronounce the name of that Belgian partner?
Well done. Rick, better.
Q-O-V-E-R. Rick.
Cover.
Wow.
Oh,
Cover. There's no C in there. How can it be cover when it's Q?
because they're Belgians. You should know that no one understands Belgians.
That's not fair, Chris. But this is the right answer. And yeah, Revolut has worked with them quite a lot already in the past because of their very strong and very tailored embedded insurance offering that they offer. There's I think one of the real success stories of fintech with an international reach coming from Belgium from the recent years. We all know that we have the Swifts and the bank contacts, etc. But those are old fintech companies. But from the new ones, I think Cover is one of the very good examples that we still have some of these very decent startups popping up in Belgium.
I think all of the frequent flyers are going to rejoice if they can manage to get their hands on that, particularly with the amount of flights that are being cancelled lately, because I do know that one of the additions of that is the ease at which you can submit a claim for which you are insured. And you can do that straight from the app, no extra fuss or anything like that. And yeah, that would be handy, because I haven't bothered claiming on the last 3 flights of mine that are cancelled because it's just such a hassle, and you get about 20 quid back anyway.
Yeah.
Mary, what does that mean in terms of scoring?
And what does it mean in terms of scoring? 1, it means I like this development. 2, Chris gets 7. 3, Andrew gets 4 plus 1, 5. Look at that math.
All right, and the next one may be one for Andrew, as he joined our virtual roundtable yesterday. The European single currency package included a legislative proposal establishing the legal framework for a possible digital euro. However, it also included something else, something that may immediately kill the business case for that possible digital retail euro. What is it?
I know you said it's for Andrew, but I think it might be building on your last question, Rick. The digital euro is being created in Brussels, not in brothels, or maybe both. But that's quite a coincidence, because this morning I made a Belgian waffle, and this afternoon I made a Frenchman talk bollocks.
But actually, isn't it from the ECB? And isn't the ECB in Frankfurt, Germany?
Well, they always have to come through Belgium, don't they?
They are now in Belgium, and I expect them to go to France going further. But
I mean, is it true that the smartest man in Belgium moved to the Netherlands and both countries had a big drop in IQ?
I didn't even understand you there.
I liked your face.
Well, one of the things that was included in the blurb around that announcement was that 60% of the people surveyed still want cash. So why? What's the point behind the CBDC of 60% of the people? Over half of the people still want to use cash, and cash is going to be preserved. So what's the benefits of a CBDC over cash?
Well, a lot of it's to do with trying not to make people feel threatened with the removal of cash. In fact, it's been a big week this week for European regulations, and that they're not just announced the digital euro plans, but also PSD2 moving to PSD3. And PSD3 is all about consumer protections, combating fraud, making a level playing field between
licenses
and banks, and specifically making sure that there's a wide availability of cash across all ATMs and merchants and retailers.
I think that was in the payment services regulation.
Well, I mean, the digital euro announcement made a specific point that it's to complement cash. And I think the issue is that there's a clause in there, and maybe this is the killer clause, Rick, that every EU member state must accept cash and digital currencies. Well, there's actually quite a lot of countries that don't use cash at all in Europe, particularly in Northern Europe.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's for me one of the reasons, or that was for me the reason for setting up that question.
I think also that in terms of what could possibly kill the case is not what was included, but what wasn't included, because they've specifically not included anything to do with programmability. And up until now, a huge amount of the discussion around CBDCs has been the programmability of money. Programmable money, this is what they've been talking about for a variety of reasons. Programmable money has been one of the key cornerstones of the rationale behind a CBDC. And yet the digital euro, as this framework outlines, they've simply digitized cash. And as a matter of fact, they haven't completely digitized it because there's some benefits that you've got of cash that you won't get with a digital euro, complete and utter anonymity, for example. So they haven't invented something new. There's a huge missed opportunity. They haven't really thought of what it could be, a complete reinvention and realization. And as a result, it doesn't really serve any purpose. And to me, that's the thing that will kill it, is that there is no use case. There's no compelling reason why an end consumer will go, yes, once the digital euro is out, I'm going to rush off to my local post office, open an account and get my digital euros because I've got this burning desire to use them. What is that?
It's a very tough stretch that probably that may also kill the thing. It's the central banks that don't want to take a political position. And that's why they decide we're not going to make it programmable. Payments can be programmable, money won't. And it can't be too compelling either, because in that case, they would take away cash from banks with a possible impact on stability of financial services as well. But what you have right now is I see in I just launched a poll on LinkedIn asking how do you look at digital euro? And most people say it's a beautiful solution, but it doesn't solve any problem. And it's exactly that. And please don't come to me with the idea of financial inclusion, in this case, in the context of Europe, because if you're looking at people that need cash because they don't have access to anything else, how are you going to explain them if they don't know how to use a card, how to use a wallet? I don't know.
I've got one question here for Mary, which is, there's a lot of confusion about CBDCs. And I saw the tweet, which I think was Robert Kennedy Jr., saying that Fed now is coming and it's all about the Fed launching a CBDC, which it isn't. What's the situation with Fed now and digital dollar?
Oh gosh, Chris, you asked the big questions. Well, we're coming out here. It just released how many people signed up with the Federal Reserve? I think it was like 47-ish banks in the US, if I'm remembering that right. So like July 1st, action.
That's tomorrow.
Yep.
Or today, if you're listening on July the 1st.
Yeah.
Or yesterday, if you're listening on July the 2nd.
But is it for an instant payment solution? Or
it's for faster payments.
But that's not the digital dollar.
But there's a lot of confusion going on here. To Chris's point of that tweet, which I think happened like a month or so ago. Bless you, Rick.
Apologies.
All right, points. Chris had first person's advantage 8. Andrew 7.
But there's more digital currency news. The Bank of England shared this week probably the biggest reason why Britcoin should not be called Britcoin as a comparison to Bitcoin. What is it?
Got it, because it's London, it's British, it's mine. It's because Britcoin sounds too much like Britain's Got Talent, and we don't need one of those like Eurovision or anything like that. That's why it mustn't be called Britcoin, because people think it's something to do with Simon Cowell.
I actually stopped listening, Andrew, the moment that you said that you're British, because last week you said you were Safi.
No, I didn't say I am British. I said it's British, the question. Just because I live here does not make me British. Never, ever confuse me with being
Because we have a Brit living in Poland.
Exactly, yes.
Well, I am British. And speaking with the Bank of England, they told me that they are worried it will get confused with Britney Spears, who was meant to appear last weekend at Glastonbury with Elton John singing Hold Me Closer, which, if you don't know, is a zipped up version of Tiny Dancer, one of his biggest songs. You know the one, Rick. It's Hold Me Closer, Tiny Dancer, count the headlights on the highway. And then...
No, but perhaps Andrew should sing it. Maybe I knew it then.
No, definitely not. You and Rick, you and Chris have got this whole singing thing sewn up here.
I mean, to be honest, it finishes with lay me down in sheets of linen. You had a busy day today, which sounds like the typical day for Andrew Bailey, the governor of the Bank of England.
Look, I think that the big thing is that if and when a digital pound ever gets launched, as is typical here in Britain, they'll probably put it out to public vote. which is how the last lifeguard thing got named Boaty Mac Boatface, or it didn't get named Boaty Mac Boatface, but that was the most popular thing being voted for. So it's not a coin, so it can't be called anything coin, because come on, I don't know why these things are called coins. They're not physical. So, you know, they'll probably take inspiration from Ripple and call it something like Drizzle, you know, because Drizzle, it always rains in the UK. Yeah, you know, Drizzle, our CBDC, or otherwise they might call it the Derling, you know, instead of the sterling, the digital sterling, Derling.
But why? Why not Britcoin?
Well, because it's not a damn coin, and it's too confusing for the public to call it a coin. I mean, you know, scammers take advantage. By the way, bizarre story in the news this week to know that the auction house Stack's Bowers sold physical Bitcoins at 200% of their face value. So one Bitcoin was sold for $78,000. True story. What the hell is even a physical Bitcoin?
I've got two of them. And
basically, a USB stick?
It's a physical coin that when you break it open has the Bitcoin address inside.
Oh, really?
Yep.
Absolutely bizarre thing. So you've got two of them, Chris?
Yeah, I brought them years ago just because I thought it was funny. And obviously now they're worth quite a lot.
They will be worth an absolute fortune, because apparently before in an auction before, there was a single token that was for sale that was actually 10 Bitcoins. And when that token was minted, Bitcoins were only worth $10 per Bitcoin. Whereas now this thing is worth, for the collectors, quite a substantial chunk of money. What's Bitcoin worth at the moment? Trading about 29,000 per dollar?
No, it got up.
It's gone up this week. It's over 30.
So over 30. So there we go. Over $300,000 for a physical representation of a digital thing.
Let's bring it back to Britcoin, because you know, the Bank of England did, in all seriousness, tell me they wanted to call it a Charlie after the king, but then they realized that might get mixed up with cocaine, so they dropped that idea. And the Bank of England's head of CBDCs, Tom Mutton, was actually talking with Bloomberg this week and said quite a few interesting things, but the two that stood out for me is that when the Britcoin is launched, or whatever it's called, a Charlie or a Doge or whatever, it will be possibly not using blockchain, because there's a big argument amongst the banks and the Bank of England and others around whether it should be blockchain based or just using a conventional ledger. And then secondly, that it might replace cash, which goes against the grain of what the European Union's just announced.
That's why you left the EU.
Keep cash. Sorry?
That's maybe one of the reasons you left the EU.
Yeah, we want to do our own thing.
Valid reason.
Yeah. So I was going to say a lot more things about the European Union, but I better keep quiet.
That's for our political quiz show.
But Mutton did also indicate that...
Is that Mutton dressed up as lamb? Oh, no, sorry.
If there is to be a UK CBDC, it's still years away, so people don't have to get too excited about them yet. There's still a lot of experimentation and a lot of things going on, and debates on whether or not retail versus wholesale and what the distribution would be and who's doing the KYC. And
I don't think it's going to take more than 5 years. If it happens, it will be within 5 years. But right. I mean, 2 weeks ago, we had the blockchain, the project manager of CBDC of the Bank of Israel around our virtual table, and he had exactly the same comment. He said, in terms of technology, we're not making any decision yet. First, we need to sharpen the idea on what the future coin should be, and then we'll see which technology is best to create it. I think that makes perfect sense. It's also something that banks should have been doing in their digital transformation from the very beginning, instead of just taking all the fancy tools, implementing them, and evaluating later on whether it was the right way to do.
Points. And then speeder rounds, which is a new word that I just threw out there. Okay, Chris, 9 points. Andrew, 6. Let's go.
Speeder round. Most startups fail. We know that. However, there is one easy consideration to make to improve success rate of a startup. What is it? Faster.
Yeah, I can't be fast because when I was thinking about this question, I was thinking about the Dutch startup that I've been working with, whose 5 founders recently drove to create a headquarters in Bruges, which is in Belgium, as in Norwich.
Yeah, I know.
Drove from Amsterdam across the border. They got pulled up by a policeman, and the officer stood next to the window of the driver, and the driver just said, "Why have you stopped us? We can't have been speeding because this car can't even make the speed limit." And the cop said, "Well, no. Do you not realize what car you're driving?" And he said, "Oh, yeah, it's a classic Renault 4. Right," said the Belgian officer, and said, "How many of you are in the car?" And 5, sir. There you go. 1 too many. Renault 4 is only for 4 people. Well, the fintech guys were astounded that the cop could be that stupid, and said, the number 4 doesn't mean how many passengers you can have in the car. And the Belgian officer said, "Well, are you telling me that I don't know the rules?" They said, "No, not at all, but the Renault 4 is just the model number. It's not the capacity." So the cop now looked a bit unsure, and he got
Where
on
is this
the radio to
going?
his boss. He got on the radio to his boss and said, "Boss, it's Steph here. Listen, I've got 5 Dutch guys here in a Renault 4, and they insist it's not illegal." And his boss came back and said, "Steph, I don't have time for your stupid questions. I've got 3 Italians and a Fiat Uno."
Mary, explain them the fast rounds.
Oh,
Not the
that's
opposite
what a
meaning.
banana split.
I
Look,
forgot the opposite meaning here.
Oh,
clearly-
Chris has been waiting for weeks to tell that joke. Couldn't find the right situation. I just dropped it.
I'm making a Belgian week. You started with a Belgian question, so everything this week for me is taking the piss out of Belgium. I'm sorry.
Look, if you want to be successful, then you've got to follow the lead of one of the most successful startups in recent history, which is obviously OpenAI, right? So obviously the way to be successful is just scrape the entire internet. Although that might end up with you having a class action lawsuit against you, which is what's happened to Sam Altman of OpenAI this week, where a group of unnamed individuals has brought a massive multi-million-dollar lawsuit against him for illegally scraping internet and personal data off, illegally scraping data off the internet, personal data. So maybe that's not such a clever idea either. No?
Shall I repeat my question?
Well, you said easy consideration to improve the success rate. I mean,
Of a startup, no matter which startup.
yeah, so that's one.
Yeah.
I think it's got to be to have more female representation. In that, whenever I look at, it's not just tech and fintech, but most startups, they don't have enough women involved in their executive team or on the board. And there was a survey this week that showed that 45% of startups have no female representation at all, and 15% have no females on their executive team. And it's not to say that we need to have ratios and targets, but it is interesting that there's a number of very successful companies like Starling and others that have been led by women, but there's not that many. You can almost count them on, I won't say on one hand, but we have femtech. We have a lot of people involved in technology who are represent diversity, and this is Pride Week, so the LGBTQI representation also needs to be considered. And I think it's ensuring diversity, and too much of it is just an old boys club of guys who are creating startups without any diversity.
Well, yeah, I think as long as you have these different clubs of minorities that come together to promote themselves as being part of a bigger community, I think we're not doing it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, I wrote a blog 15 years ago, or maybe even longer, saying it was all about sexism in the city. And basically, there's a very misogynistic, testosterone-fueled attitude in finance, which doesn't actually embrace diversity, and particularly the female representation in the senior executive teams. But it is changing. You've got Janet Fraser leading Citibank now. You've got a lot of women who are very strong in finance. There's just not enough of them.
I think
Luckily, we have Mary.
Being a brother to 4 sisters and a father to 2 daughters, and having a wife and a female cat in the household, I can definitely say that the success of startups would be increased if they increase their female ratio at board level, simply because women think differently. it is critical for all boards to have a diversity of thought across them. And so many boards that I see, I look there and it doesn't make any difference what industry it's in. All the board members look exactly the same. And I don't mean physical appearance. I mean, if you look at their history, at their path to the top, they've got similar education, similar background, similar geographic upbringing, etc. And it leads to a lack of the lack of ability to have rounded oversight and governance. And so simply increasing the diversity, gender diversity at your board level is going to give you a radically different tone around the boardroom table, and it will improve decision making.
But aside from that, you also need a representation of the customers that you're serving. Like Sarah Drinkwater said in that article, unless startups are selling only to men and have male-only teams, it's critical to have a well-rounded board. It's exactly that.
I think even if they are selling only to men, really, what kind of a startup sells only to men? You know, you could say a shaving startup for beard sells only to men. What a load of nonsense. There's loads of women that buy stuff to give to men as gifts. So, you know, it's very short-sighted of anybody to take that kind of an attitude.
Although it's interesting, there was a bank.
Maybe we should give Mary the word first, Chris.
I was about to ask Mary
about diversity here.
I'm responding to what Andrew just said, which is there was a bank called the GNL Bank that launched in the late 1990s. It didn't succeed. I think it was too early off the mark, but it would only sell and open accounts for people who were gay or lesbian. So there is a niche market, boutique companies out there that maybe have a kick. But I was going to ask you, Mary, this is a survey. I don't know whether it represents anything to do with the US, but what's the diversity rates like in the US? Because I see a lot of African Americans complaining about not being included, for example. And
yeah, I mean, it's white men, as you might expect, as it seems to be everywhere. But two anecdotal things about this. Of course, +1 to having a diverse board and just diverse in general. But like anecdotally, this definitely has been a club, and I would say it often feels like a fraternity club. And especially when I rewind the clock like a decade ago, it was like the networking events even, it's like uncomfortable sometimes for women, especially. I mean,
I think it's very often.
When I hosted
maybe
event,
not so much for women, but other minorities. If for example, Money 2020, it struck me, not surprised me, but I noticed there were people of color at booths. The fact that I noticed and I only saw it a few times meant that it wasn't there in the past. So there's still a lot of work to do, and still very much a white people's club.
Yeah, and again, it's like it can be an uncomfortable setting. Like I don't know if you've ever had this, but it's like the Bay booth concept where at the trade shows attract people walking around. I mean, imagine having a networking meeting at a male strip club. I can. Just like it's just weird. All right, points. 8 and 8.
Oh,
this is getting interesting.
All right, now a serious, fast question. What's the worst possible scenario as an Aussie if your debit or credit card doesn't work?
You won't be able to buy Taylor Swift tickets for the Taylor Swift tour next year. That would be devastating to Aussies.
Oh, Andrew, you keep surprising me.
There's a bizarre warning from Pure Gym actually saying that concert goers to Taylor Swift's concert must be careful that it will be the most physically demanding event that they've attended, and they can expect to walk 15,000 steps and dance to high BPM music for 3 hours continuously, constituting a really serious workout.
Is it the announcement that Westpac made this week that if you want to use their ATMs, you have to fight a kangaroo?
No.
Look, we know that the most devastating thing that can happen to an Aussie is that they won't be able to buy any beer because, of course, no self-respecting Aussie drinks water, so they wouldn't be able to hydrate. Again, Japanese food and beverage company Kirin lists Aussies at only the number 19 in the world at a 71.6 litre per capita annual consumption of beer. Little bit far behind the Czech Republic's number 1 at 181.9 litres a year
Where's
per
Belgium
capita.
these days?
Yeah, Belgium was somewhere in the middle of that.
Oh, thank God, because it's not healthy. But it's not the right answer. But I can give you a tip. We kind of discussed part of the answer some episodes ago.
Well, I still think it's like they won't be able to buy their beer because there's a lack of cash. There's a huge outcry in Australia because many companies are only accepting digital payments, and there's a lack of cash. Access to cash is difficult. We've spoken on previous shows about people having to travel 1,000 kilometers to the nearest ATM in the outback and things like that. And big news this week was that there was a massive outage from Commonwealth Bank that meant that not only could customers not use their debit and credit cards, but they couldn't even use them to draw cash from ATMs. So, they were double. How they got hold of their beer last week, I have no idea.
Or fuel for their car.
Yeah, that could be maybe number 2 on the list for an Aussie. I'm not sure.
Mary.
I'm just going to go back to fighting kangaroos because the agency that looks after the wildlife says that if you see one, stay away from it and watch how it behaves. And if it moves towards you or shows signs of being aggressive, just move away. And that was about advice in bank branches.
I was waiting for Chris because I was like, can't give him a 0. Chris, you get a 4. Andrew, you get a 9.
Woo!
Oh.
Very interesting. Although Chris might take it on the last one.
Maybe.
All right, this is not going to be a fast question, so bear with me. It's a pretty lengthy introduction. Most people know Solomon from the Judgment of Solomon, where 2 women each lay claim to being the mother of the same child. Solomon easily resolved the dispute by commanding the child to be cut in half and shared between the 2. One woman promptly renounced her claim, proving that she would rather give the child up than seek guilt. Solomon declared the woman who showed compassion to be the true mother, entitled to the whole child. In financial services, we also know Solomon, and that is David Solomon of Goldman Sachs, who is not that good in his judgments. What's the impact of that for Goldman Sachs?
Well, you've made it fairly specific questions, so it's a fairly specific answer. That like Solomon with the baby, David Solomon's offered to split the bank in 2, and that they've got a retail bank, Marcus, these days, which has not done very well, although millions have been spent on it. And then they have their investment bank, which is also not doing very well. But this is according to Deutsche Bank, and you have to bear in mind it's Deutsche Bank who maybe are throwing some shade. That they have this analyst, Matt O'Connor, who predicts that Goldman's results for the next quarter will be really bad. And in fact, they'll take some big one-time hits, and reckons that the shares will be valued at, the share earnings will be $2.97, when everyone else in the industry is saying $7.51. So that's a bit of a big, putting his money where his mouth is. We'll see if it comes true.
Yeah.
So specifically, though, bad judgment in his case was to do with Green Sky. That's the fintech firm that Goldman bought last year, and they're now going to be having to write down $500 million. So 500 million goodwill impairment, and that is specifically, bad judgment on his behalf. That's going to he's been blamed for it because I think that he was quite vocal on them investing in the first place, and that one has not panned out, and that's going to have a serious impact on Goldman Sachs.
That is correct, Mary.
I was doing my hand motion. The conductor is wrapping it up. All right, points. Chris, 8, Andrew, 7. Chris is the winner by 7 points.
Summer cocktail for Chris.
Do you want another one?
Yes,
Is
one
it
more, please.
funny? Is it funny?
So it's a Belgian joke about the Dutch, which is the Dutch husband says to the Dutch wife, "Put your coat on, dear." "Why, darling? Are we going out?" "No, I am. I'll just turn the heating off." The Dutch are known to be quite mean, Mary.
All right,
Stingy.
I'm feeling that. Yeah, I'm feeling that.
All right. I think we're done with good and bad jokes here.
I've got more.
For
I've
listening.
got a lot more.
Oh yeah, no doubt. That's for the comedy quiz show.
Okay.
Wait, this is the comedy quiz show.
This is
One
the
more
comedy
joke,
quiz
Chris.
show.
You want one more? Okay.
One more.
How do all Dutch recipes begin? Borrow 6 eggs, 200 grams of flour, half a pint of milk. The key word being borrow.
Borrow.
Yeah, as in go to your neighbor and say, "Can you give me some eggs and milk and flour?"
Ah.
Yeah.
Did you know that the Dutch actually don't speak English? So they would never use any English words.
Snap.
Thank you, everyone. I cannot wait for more international fintech news coming up soon. If you like the show, make sure to register on our website for a newsletter. Be the first to know about a new episode and some more bad jokes of Chris. If you're a big fan, have a look at the link for the merchandise on that same website. I hope to see you very soon again to entertain you, your colleagues, your friends, your family, connections, followers, cats, rabbits, dogs very soon again. Bye-bye.
Don't forget fish.